Welcome to Sex and Breakfast, the sexy way to start your day. Dishing out sexpert advice and spicy insights about sex, love, and everything in between. Hosted by sex coaches and therapists from around the globe.
So we're lighting up for your Wake and Bake episode on sex and cannabis. We're going to be exploring how this plant can enhance connection, increase sensation, and support deeper intimacy. So whether you are kind of curious or already incorporating it into your pleasure rituals, I'm going to unpack just a little bit of the science, a little bit of the stigma, and explore how you can combine cannabis and sex. Why am I qualified to talk about cannabis and sex? Well, not only am I a sex coach, I'm also a certified cannabis health coach through CCI, the Cannabis Coaching Institute. And I was really motivated to get educated on cannabis, not only because I live in California, and California has a reputation for having cannabis, and I also, over the years, found myself working in different parts of the cannabis industry, and I did this totally on accident. I basically found myself working a harvest on a large scale cannabis farm because my partner, he was growing and he invited me to work a harvest. So I got to see what that process was like. And then I ended up working alongside a gynecologist at a cannabis health clinic in the Bay Area. And then I worked for Ease. And I promise I didn't do this on purpose, but I ended up working for Ease, a cannabis delivery service where you can really easily order from an app, and Ease partners with local dispensaries to get cannabis products directly to your door. So after all of this, and then also experiencing how cannabis helped me personally enhance my sex life and work around some health conditions I have, I thought, let me get certified. let me let me get certified so that I could bring this into my private practice. And the way I bring it into my private practice is through mindful cannabis use. And sometimes I use the word conscious cannabis use, but I mean the same thing. Being mindful about it, being conscious about it. And I feel like mindful cannabis use prioritizes consent, it engages the body, it acknowledges that it's not a magic pill, although we know about so many benefits. And I think it's important to, just because we know it's natural and it's a plant and we have benefits, to not depend on it. So mindful cannabis use says, okay, I see you, but it's not always a replacement for the medicines that we do need, that our doctors prescribe. And then mindful cannabis use involves understanding your unique endocannabinoid system. So I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But I have a question for the both of you. I'm in California, and Nicole's in California, and Dominique is in California. So I just realized that we're all Californians. So it's around, and I wondered if you have any myths that you commonly experience with your clients, or if you have some questions about specific myths or in your private practices, if this comes up, especially since we're in California.
Well, when I mention cannabis with clients, I think a lot of them are shocked and don't associate it as something that can be a part of sexual wellness. I think one of the
Mm.
biggest myths and stereotypes I see is in the media are people that smoke cannabis and are considered like lazy stoners. So people who have like clung to that idea don't want to be associated with those stigmas, and so it's hard to have people transition into being interested in it for sex and their sexual health.
I love that you mentioned this lazy stoner stereotype. And to be honest, I mean, that's what I grew up with. That's what like my parents convey. That's what all the comedy, whenever cannabis is in a movie, it's portraying somebody who's in the couch, right? They've smoked, they're so high and now they're lazy, right? And that um well, that can happen. And usually if that happens, it's because you've overconsumed. But so many people in my own life and in my own practice actually consume the uh, right products for them, and then they're actually more productive because it works with either their neurodivergence or it works with just the things that they need supported in them that they're actually they're living really productive lives and sex lives as well. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
I have clients that have asked. They actually, I don't bring it up, so it's really interesting. They're the ones that always have brought it up, but they're looking for things to help them relax other than alcohol. Um, so I know we're gonna do a whole. I know there's a whole episode that will exist or does exist about um, non out like ways not to use alcohol, but they want to know how they can relax so that they can get ready for sex because a lot of them suffer with anxiety around sex and their own bodies. So, on top of all the other coaching and meditations and things I give them, I share with them that edibles are a great way if they don't feel comfortable smoking, right? So, edibles or I don't know what they're called, Norlyn. Maybe you can help me. There's the drinks that are made with like THC, CBD, and CBN sometimes. They're not edibles, but they're drinks. So kind of the same
Yeah, yeah.
thing. But the dosages go anyway from like, well, there's a whole dosage system out there, folks. So it's like if you're really low to really high. So I try to guide them on that as well. So yeah, just also, with my experience, I also grew up, thinking with the movies like Friday, that thinking that, oh, if I smoke weed, I'm gonna end up on the couch, and I learned that that wasn't the case.
Yeah, and I love that you are bringing up and the second most popular ingestion method is
Mhm.
through eating, right? Through eating a gummy. That's mostly what you're going to see, or more traditionally, baked goods, cookies that have cannabis that are made with infused butter, which is really fun. But a note on ingestion methods, they all have different onsets. So for example, I like to tell my clients, for unplanned sexual experiences, you're going to be looking for smoking either flower or smoking a vape or under the tongue sublingually because you want that fast action, versus, oh, I've already got this evening planned in a couple of hours. Let me time this gummy so that I'm feeling the effects at the right time versus, playing a guessing game. And this is kind of what I do with my clients. I ask them to set their goals, let me know what you're trying to get out of the experience so that you can co create and time appropriately depending on what ingestion method you have available. So I love that you have clients that are asking about this and you are resourced enough to guide them here and there about that. Cool. So, like I said earlier, I think a part of mindful cannabis use is learning the science. So, I'm just going to take a couple minutes and um, talk about what I think is important. So, I said this long word earlier, endocannabinoid system. And that stands for, or ECS is how I refer to it short term. So, the ECS, this endocannabinoid system, it consists of three parts. And you've got endocannabinoids, you've got receptors, and you can think of those as like a lock and key system in our body. So we've got receptors, those are the locks. You've got the endocannabinoids, those are the keys. And then we have enzymes that make and break down the cannabinoids in our system. And inside of us, we have endogenous cannabinoids, and those are the ones that we make, whereas the cannabis plant has cannabinoids that are very similar, so similar they're able to park in that receptor. Okay. And the important thing to note is that they park in those receptors with a greater affinity than our own. And this is why tolerance breaks are so important, because you ultimately want your own ECS functioning optimally in between cannabis sessions, because that helps moderate our mood, our temperature, inflammation in the body, pain, pleasure. The list is literally endless of these different body systems that the ECS is a part of. So, taking tolerance breaks is important. And essentially, THC, the most commonly referenced cannabinoid in the plant, mimics something called anandamide, and that is known as like the bliss molecule. And so this is one of the routes where THC can create this feeling of bliss and enhance sexual pleasure and also reduce anxiety and intimacy. And another very big way that this cannabis helps is through vasodilation, and which is the widening of blood vessels, which increase blood basically to your erogenous zones, your genitals, heightening overall physical sensations.
Woohoo!
So now knowing kind of a little bit of the way cannabis works, that we actually have a system. It's unlike like alcohol, right? Alcohol gives us effects, but it's not functioning so neatly that we have these receptors that are actually almost designed to receive the cannabinoids. So now that you know a little bit of the science, do you have any current client concerns that pop up in your minds, or do you have any, um, questions, how you would work this into clients?
Not only would I recommend cannabis to clients, but I know several people who use and recommend cannabis for many physical issues and diseases that have they've just had so much success with them that I feel like there's more to gain. There's more positive attributes that it can give us than the negative. But
Mm.
again, it's not for everyone. And also, I know that our audience might be in a place where it's not an option. So we're very we're all in California, so yeah, that depends on where we are as well.
Yeah, and this is something, depending on where you're listening from, reaching out to a cannabis coach like myself can help guide you to what is available. And also, I want to say that if you're in a place that you actually can't consume, because I definitely want to respect the laws in your area, but if you can't consume cannabis, or you can't consume cannabis not because of laws, but because of um, a profession and drug testing, right? Um, you can still look towards your endocannabinoid system. You can actually eat a diet that supports your overall endocannabinoid tone. And that is an area that I think is overlooked, especially when it comes to sex and pleasure. So don't despair if you're realizing you actually can't partake during this part of your life, or what have you. You can always look into reading about the endocannabinoid system, or working with um, a nutritionist. That's the word. Work with a nutritionist and say, hey, I'm curious about this ECS, can I eat in a way that supports it?
Yeah, and I wanted to say, like, I also recommend cannabis to my clients. Um, Not only, the edibles and smoking if they're comfortable with that, but also the topical products, the like creams and gels. I think for me, one of the best facial serums I ever used, it was so expensive, was like a CBD infused kind, and it was amazing. But I also wanted to ask about pregnant people. So, can pregnant individuals or women who want to get pregnant use cannabis products? And if so, how? What would be the best way? Like in college, I had a girlfriend who was pregnant and she smoked every day. My mom was like, no, I partook in wine and all that kind of stuff with you. You turned out fine. But, in general, what is the recommended, what's recommended for people like that?
Yeah, I would say in general, always speak with a medical professional. And with that being said, not all medical professionals are cannabis friendly. So you may
Right.
be looking for a second and third opinion. Luckily, there's lots of resources
Mm-hmm.
available, lots of books on cannabis, lots of, we live in a time where there's lots of resources available for
Mm-hmm.
cannabis. So always defer to your medical professional. But I will say that if you're going to use a cannabis product, some of them don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So if you can potentially be safely using topicals, because if a topical, you're eating it, that's going to cross the blood-brain barrier. But if you're putting it on your skin for relief of pain, that could be a safer alternative. Or going back to, hey, maybe if you're like worried about um, maybe you're a regular cannabis user and you are making the decision to abstain, but you're worried about how you'll be, especially if you used it to manage something, managing anxiety or managing, you name it. Again, I turn towards shifting your diet, saying, okay, well, for these 9 months, I'm not going to be consuming cannabis as I used to, but can I eat in a way that supports my pregnancy and supports um, like the ECS system overall. So always check with your doctor, but it'll be waiting for you after pregnancy,
Thank you.
especially if you're in California. So I think this is a really good segue into some of the potential risks and considerations. And a couple of things of note is um, that there's something called the grapefruit rule or grapefruit principle, and I think basically there's certain medications that your doctor will say, like, you shouldn't be drink grapefruit juice while you're on this medication, and it's because something in the grapefruit will change how some of your organs are processing the that specific medication. So through the same mechanism where grapefruit can interact is the same with THC, and potentially CBD as well. So that's a flag also. I'm like, are you on a medication when I speak to my clients that you can't have grapefruit juice? And if that's yes, then we've got to talk about that. But overall, you just have to be aware of all interactions. So I think right away you can go to drugchecker.com, and that can just be a first line of just checking on things, but also speaking with your doctor. Um, and going back to pregnancy for a second, I also want to say that in some areas you can get in trouble even if you make the decision to safely consume cannabis and during pregnancy, you could potentially get in trouble if the medical found out, if they had to do a test for something and they saw cannabis in your system, you could get in trouble for, I can't remember the official term, but basically being being negligent or, doing something harmful while you're pregnant. So look into that as well. Nicole, I see you have a question about, related to risks and considerations.
Yeah, I actually know someone who recently had a DUI and in California. And for those of you who haven't had a DUI, I guess you have to take all these weekly educational seminars on alcohol and stuff like that. And he said they had a whole class just on cannabis and sharing how it's a gateway drug and it's addictive. And this was really shocking and alarming to hear from the California government that they were saying these things. And I just wanted to know, like, is that true?
Are you asking, is it true that cannabis is a gateway drug, or is it true that the system is educating people in this way?
I guess there are two questions.
Okay.
Is cannabis a gateway drug? So I don't want people to be like freaked out, like, oh, I don't want to take this cannabis because I don't want to potentially one day be, you know, on the streets, as a whatever. And then the second one is it addictive?
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I love this question, and when when people express their concerns, they have curiosity, but they're worried about, if is this a slippery slope? How do I know where when it becomes a problem, right? And I think any new substance, you should watch yourself closely, because you can use so many things. You can use food as a self-soother, and that can become detrimental. Now, I always challenge people and say, well, if cannabis is a gateway drug, do you drink? like like what is this person's relationship with alcohol? Because alcohol, it's an unequal standard, like, or it's a double standard to say that, oh yeah, alcohol's fine, I can have, and no one will blink an eye over having, 5 drinks a night. But cannabis has the stigma. So I ask people, how do they feel about that? How do they feel one is different than the other? And we kind of bust some of those myths. um, is it addictive? I'm more dealing with, in the realm of dependency. um, and if you suspect that you're sensitive to any substances because you may have prior experience getting addicted to it, I would be cautious about your relationship to cannabis. But no, it's not a gateway drug. You know, in any other, I mean, I would just again treat it like any other new thing you're introducing into your body. But I will bring up something called cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome, CHS, and it is a condition that's characterized by severe and persistent nausea and abdominal pain. And it can happen in rare cases to people who are long term cannabis users and at high dosages. So some people, they just increase and increase and increase because they their tolerance is high. And this is why tolerance breaks is important, because then you give your ECS system a rest. You avoid things like any sort of creeping up dependencies. And then you also prevent yourself from being physiologically dependent and triggering the CHS syndrome. So, yeah, that's a shock to hear that they're educating so severely in California like that. Yeah, Dominique, did you have any? I see that you have some questions about CBN.
Yes, I did. So my question was, well, I had a couple questions, but we'll just start with what's the difference between CBD? Well, I know CBD, but then there's THC and CBN. So if you could
Yeah.
explain that, because I know people who have recommended me not to try CBN, and I have. It's a no for me, but my husband loves it. So if you could.
Yeah, really quick here, because this brings up the topic of cannabinoids, that there's more than THC and CBD. Those are the ones that get the most press, right? You've got THC, that's going to be the main psychoactive compound. That's the one that makes you feel high. CBD is the one that's known as non psychoactive. It's known for its calming, anti anxiety, anti inflammatory effects. I mean, there's a laundry list. There's so many things that each of these do. And then CBN is considered to be mildly psychoactive. And I see it popping up more and more on cannabis products. And most often I see it in cannabis products that are marketed for sleep support. So it has a very sedative effect. And CBN actually forms as THC ages. So, funny story, I actually kind of accidentally dosed myself with a bunch of CBN ones and had a bad time because I had an old tincture that had THC. The shelf life, basically, it wasn't going to harm me, but the THC turned into CBN. And then I was like, why am I so freaking tired and not functional? So watch the dates on these products, and take them with caution because these compounds shift. So really quick, THC can boost sensation and arousal, CBD can reduce anxiety and tension, and CBN can support that restful aftercare or relaxation based intimacy. So those are kind of 3 ways you can use each of those. But I definitely recommend looking at a chart online that describes all the differences of these cannabinoids.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
This being a show about sex, I have to ask, is there a lube that you would recommend for people with CBD or THC in it, or both?
Yeah, I'm going to send you over to Foria. Foria is a really, really great brand, and they've got topicals, they've got suppositories. Now, don't sleep on suppositories. There's amazing vaginal suppositories with THC and CBD that have amazing benefits. So there's a lot out there, and what I'll say is that it's best to use these cannabis lubes as, I like to think of them as marinades. Like, don't just put it on right during sex, right? You want to put these topicals on with 20 minutes before intercourse is actually going to happen, or longer, because you need time for your body to absorb them and for vasodilation to occur. Whereas lube, since you're just using it for a texture change, you can put that on when you're in the middle of sex, right? So that's my tip on lube, but have fun. Yeah, thanks for joining this conversation about cannabis and sex. And there's so much more. I don't know if you could tell, I'm really passionate about it and I can talk for hours about this. So I'm just going to leave you with, if you want to learn more about cannabis and sex, I developed something called the Vibes Method. And each letter stands for something really fun. And it's the way I bring my clients into a holistic, mindful cannabis and sex experience.
Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, send us some love by sharing, hitting subscribe, and leave a review. It really helps us connect to more incredible people like you. If you want to learn more about sex coaching or therapy, you can find us at sexandbreakfastpodcast.com, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at sexandbreakfastpodcast. The people helping us cook this all up are Michael Merle, creating our tasty tunes, dishing out our audio and video is Max Rainier, and our delectable visual designs by Brie Vilaubi.